Shalom, Avi.
Shalom, Tuly. Rav Tuly, how you doing?
It's great to see you. We are having such an exciting morning today covering the U.S. elections, the important elections, the historic elections. They're important from a political perspective, of course, but they're also important from a biblical and spiritual perspective as well. We just had on with us General Yechiel Gozal from the IDF and Josh Reinstein from the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus. We've had just before that Rabbi Yehuda Glick, and now Avi. It's great to have you. Tell us a little bit about your perspective. You are the head of Israel Unwired and the Israel Video Network. You are one of the leading advocates for Israel on social media today, and tell us your perspective on this nail biter of an election.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Tuly. Really pleasure speaking with you, and thank you for everything you're doing for Israel and the Jewish people at Israel 365. I'd like to start out as follows. I mean, I think the elections are going to go for President Trump. I think it's already clear, but it's not. We still don't know final results. But the most important message is as follows. And again, as believers, people of faith, we all know God runs the world, right? We support this politician, we support that politician. Regardless, we shouldn't put our trust in politicians. We should put our trust in one above and in our partnership with him to take responsibility for our own lives, for our families' lives, for our communities' lives, to make the world a better place, regardless of who was elected. Sometimes we're going to be happy, and sometimes we're going to be disappointed, and maybe even very disappointed. But the sun will come up the next day regardless, and it's up to us to make the world a better place and have our faith that God is running things, even if sometimes he says no to the politician we want to be elected. So that's the most important message to get out there. But as for politics, this has been a crazy historic election. It definitely is one where it has never been clearer between the two different camps. You have one camp that believes in working for, I'm going to be talking as an American Jew right now, actually working for the American people, working against sending more jobs abroad to help the American people. You have that same camp that understands Israel is a clear interest of America, for America to be a strong country and help with a lot of things, with intelligence, with military, with dealing with things in the Middle East. Never before have we had a president who so clearly understood and acted upon the knowledge that the alliance between America and Israel is critical. That, as Jared Kushner actually said last week in a fabulous interview with Ben Shapiro, he said, listen, people always talk about America being an honest broker. But we're not supposed to be an honest broker. America has to look after its interests, and our interest is the alliance with Israel. And you finally have the Trump administration working according to that knowledge. And that is so clear and so true. A strong America is an America that understands how beneficial Israel is to the United States of America in so many ways. And that's on intelligence, on military, but then on the spiritual realm as well. Israel and America are two countries in the world that are very much founded on the biblical principles of belief in God, and that God gave man freedom. It's not man who gives us freedom. Unfortunately, there are those on the opposite side of the camp that believe, no, it's man that allows freedom, and we're going to take freedoms away as we want, depending upon what our decisions are. But that's not how Israel came to be, and that's not how the United States of America came to be. It's on the reliance and the connection with God. So in so many ways, it's so clear more than ever before the difference between the two camps. So definite ramifications when we see who wins and who loses. Yeah. But it definitely looks like President Trump is going to win. And as I've been calling it for the past few weeks, the Democrats are going to make trouble to delegitimize his win.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been so many surprises in this campaign. And, I'm somebody who, like yourself, follows the news very carefully. And I actually just got back from the United States. I was in America just last week. Right now, I'm in Dude in quarantine in my newsroom. I'm in quarantine with my green screen newsroom. And I was shocked because if you read the newspapers or watch the television, I mean, it seemed like a shoe-in for Biden, that Trump had no chance. And the polls had Biden, you know, as like they thought it was going to be a clear road to the 270 electoral seats and clear road to victory. They were predicting a what's it called? I'm missing the word, but they were predicting like a real like a landslide. Thank you. That's been coming from the media. That was the consistent message of the media. The question was how big of a landslide.
Right.
And at the same time, so there's sort of this fake news thing going on that President Trump has been talking about, and other people have been mocking him for identifying that. At the same time, you have this really active role of censorship that's coming from social media and from Facebook and from Twitter. And Avi, I think that both, we at Israel 365 and you at Israel Unwired and Israel Video Network have seen firsthand the dangers of social media censorship. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. To touch upon your first point, I mean, I actually, again, went public saying this a week or two ago, that if you look at elections, even though I've never predicted elections in my life, not in America, not in Israel. Never, never, never. I never feel secure enough to predict. This is the first time ever in my life I predicted with confidence that President Trump will win, even though, again, it was clear that the Democrats were going to put problems to try to delegitimize his win. But I said clearly the election is going to be between those who believe mainstream media and support in one way, shape, or form the censorship by big tech social media companies, all in the name of fake news, who would all vote for President Biden because they're believing what the mainstream media is telling them and not knowing the information the mainstream media is hiding from them and social media is hiding from them, versus people who no longer either watch or believe mainstream media and are against the growing censorship of big tech social media companies. They would vote for President Trump. In the election, we would see who's the bigger public. And in terms of the actual censorship issue specifically, yeah, we were one of the first companies targeted by censorship already in 2016. No one was talking about it back then, and we got hit. We had posts of ours that were removed by Facebook. We were threatened that our pages of 500,000 people, this is back in 2016, that our pages of Israel Video Network connected to Israel would be totally removed by Facebook if we didn't remove certain posts. That there was nothing hateful, no problem about it whatsoever. It was just promoting support for Israel and obviously calling out lies of the anti-Israel camp. Just on that basis, they were censoring our posts and threatening to take down our pages. So we've been in this for a long time before anyone else was talking about it. To make it even more interesting, when I started my company together with my partner, who you know, Avi Abelow, this is back in 2011 when we started Israel Video Network. I called it back then. I said we were going to ride the wave of Facebook and we were going to grow and use it as best as possible. But the day will come soon where Facebook is going to stop us because they're going to censor right-wing voices. And we made that part of our business strategy, ride the wave of social media, but grow to be as independent as possible to be able to live without social media. And I know we spoke about those things years ago when we were consulting about your growth and how to do things. And that was also the strategy we told you back then when we were consulting. We were telling everyone there, because to me it was clear as day, even in 2011, that the left will find a way to shut down voices of the right that will grow on social media, because unfortunately that is the way of the left historically. And here we're in historic times where social media allowed voices of belief and voices of patriots and voices that are called the right but Bible believing people, that all of a sudden we finally had the freedom to express our values that were not being expressed by mainstream media, and the day would come when they would shut us down and try to shut down our voices, and that's what we're witnessing.
Yeah, well, it's great to have that perspective, Avi. Not somebody who's sort of just an observer, but somebody who's really in the thick of it. We're great. It's great to have our friend Ruthie. Ruthie, you're on mute, so make sure to hit unmute. And Ruthie works with Avi very closely. Your hair looks wonderful, Ruthie. You look great. We still can't hear you. Why are you still on mute? Or I don't know. Let us know when you could. Cannot hear you. Cannot hear you. All right. Well, when she figures that out, we'll bring her back. But tell us about your work with Ruthie as an introduction.
Sure.
She figures out her microphone.
Sure. Ruthie works together with Sarah Pillay. They are a powerhouse team of Jewish women here living in the Holy Land, and they dedicate their time in working on strengthening the relationship between Israel and the United States of America, working with politicians in America on both sides of the aisle, both Republicans and Democrats, to bring them to Israel and show them Judea and Samaria, give them sides to the issues of what Israel is dealing with that they are not given by the mainstream media, by the other lobbying groups in Washington, or that might even bring them to Israel. So their work is critical in behind the scenes in really strengthening the relationship between Israel and America, meeting experts in Israel, meeting politicians in Israel, and again, talking about issues that they would not be open, that they would not have been available to be presented to them otherwise. So Ruthie and Sarah are a powerhouse of Jewish women here in the homelands.
Ruthie,
can you hear me now?
Are you feeling the power? Are you feeling it?
So powerhousing or falling asleep, one or the other.
Yeah. Were you up all night, or did you get up early to watch the election results?
No, definitely did not. I just, we had a feeling that this one would be pretty close. We knew the polling was really not reflecting what people were thinking and feeling. They might have been saying something different, but those the Marano Trumpers, people were just hiding, and it shouldn't be like that. And that's what upsets me and worries me about America right now. But we were pretty sure that the internal polls, and just from talking and keeping a handle on things, it looked like.
You'll appreciate this, and Avi, I'm sure you will as well. I just got back from the United States, where I went to go visit my family in Ohio. And I remember that I also went to visit in 2016 when everybody was expecting Hillary Clinton to be the clear winner. And Donald Trump was like a joke who didn't even have a chance. But I remember coming from Israel and being surprised at how many Trump signs I saw in people's yards. This time I arrived in Columbus about 2 weeks ago, and on the way home from the airport from the airport in Columbus, I didn't see a single Trump sign. It was almost as if Joe Biden was running uncontestedly. Okay, and I was saying that, this guy's got no chance. And everybody in Israel is going to be so disappointed because President Trump has no chance. But then we went to go visit my grandmother in Cleveland. And when you drive from Columbus to Cleveland, it's like a whole different country. No more Biden signs, only Trump signs, but not little yard signs, big billboards and banners and barns that are painted, Trump 2020. And then you pull into, Beechwood, Ohio, and it's the same thing again. No more Trump signs, only Biden signs. And I think that, really speaks to the fact that here we are now. It's they've been voting for 24 hours after the voting started in America, and it's down to the wire. It's 50-50, 49.8 to 48.6, and the votes are continuing to come in, and it's like never been this close. What do both of you, Ruthie, we'll start with you. What do you think that this says about what's going on in America today? And is this unprecedented?
Well, if you take a look at the map of the United States, it shows exactly, Tuly, what you were starting to show us. Look at Ohio first. Let's take one state as an example. Florida is a close example too, but Ohio, it's even more clear. The polls were showing a 0.1, something like that, advantage to Trump, and now he's taking it by a full 8%. And I think those are still the numbers as of at least an hour ago. And so there's a surprise there because we underestimated the power of the people who were quiet. And if you take a look at the general map, you see it's almost, it's amusing, but it's a little scary. The city centers are blue and the entire states are red. So an Israeli just said to me, I don't understand. Every state looks like it's all red. How is any state going to blue? And you have to explain that those are set population centers. So that you look at some big cities and those are blue, but they're tiny on their map of their state. And then the rest of the state is all red. And that really shows that the rural population is conservative and the cities are more Democratic, but mixed. So that's where there's room for change. I think people will see that we're going to see more of a move towards a change, not in the rural areas, but in the cities. They're the ones deciding it because they're the ones changing a little bit. In Philadelphia, they're talking about whether there will be voter fraud or not. Why? Why Philadelphia? Because it's such a center bastion of Democrats that the Republicans they're not even being let into the polling booths where they have these yellow, they have a yellow piece of paper that should let them in to check how things are going and if things are going legally, and they're being kept out. So the Democrats know that their central power comes from their cities, and they don't want to erode that power in any way, because then you'll see a map that really it tends towards the red, and that's what we saw in Ohio. And there's huge support for Trump in Ohio, and he won it easily, more easily than expected. And Florida is fairly the same. We're not seeing it as much in Wisconsin, in Georgia, but that's the trend.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Avi, would you agree with that trend?
Yeah, and you want to know, I'm going to use Florida as an example. I've been someone talking about for ages how put white Americans aside. I mean, I hate all this this geographic breaking up of groups, or not or identity stuff. But put white Americans aside, put Jewish Americans aside. We're not all white, we're Jews, right? Let's focus on Florida. I've been talking about the minorities of America, how they have been going through a change since the Trump administration. And I think we're going to see the final polling numbers, and people are going to be shocked at the level of support for President Donald Trump, the growth in the African-American community and the Hispanic community. And just now, supposedly, Miami-Dade County in Florida is supposedly one of the strongest Democratic counties in all of the United States of America. And again, because of that minority vote, the Latino Hispanic vote. And this election, the Democrats are running with the tail between their legs. The Hispanic vote has jumped into unbelievable numbers in support of President Donald Trump. I don't have the final figures in front of me, but you're seeing, again, I defined it before, those people who believe mainstream media and those people who no longer believe mainstream media. Because if you believe mainstream media, Trump is the biggest racist that ever sat in the Oval Office, the biggest anti-Semite who ever sat in the Oval Office. Well, then why the jump in support from African-American communities if he's such a racist, and from the Latino community? It makes no sense. Those who actually see his actions, who actually listen to what he says, not through the filter of mainstream media, they say, all right, he might not be the most polished guy in how he speaks, and some things you wish he might not have said and not tweeted, but in terms of his policies, in terms of his actual caring for the American people and the minorities and those in the lower socioeconomic places in the United States of America, he's really helping. And I'm very scared about the division, the growing division in America, because if you look at President Trump, he's someone who is really caring for the American people and challenging the existing power structures, the power structures in Washington, D.C., the power structures of the foreign policy institutions where there are billions of dollars of contracts there, the power structures of the peace industry, there are whatever millions or billions of dollars that go through all those think tanks, and his policy of using real logic and rational thinking and reality to try to help the American people and help the freedom-loving world is challenging these power structures, and these power structures have control over the corporate-owned media companies. So they're pushing the centers that believe them, which are in the cities, the more liberal-minded centers, and it's creating a big, big hatred, and that hatred's only going to grow. And I'm afraid. I mean, when else do you have an election in the United States of America where shop owners boarded up their shops in cities because they're afraid of the election results in rioting? Never before, and that's very scary that America has gotten to this place. It
is scary. It is scary. You're right. And I wanted to ask you both, because you both live in Gush Etzion, right, in the Yehuda v'Shomron, Judea and Samaria, which is probably, until the Trump administration came around, it was considered by the whole world and even by America as the source of not only the problems in the Middle East, but really the problems in the whole world. And there has been great strides made to recognize the Yehuda v'Shomron, Yehuda and Judea and Samaria, and by the Trump administration, although that hasn't happened yet. And I wanted to ask what you would anticipate would be the difference in the administration as it relates to Judea and Samaria in both the Trump administration and the Biden administration. Ruthie?
Well, it's the Jerusalem street behind me. So just for people watching, you should enjoy seeing a Jerusalem on a sunny morning that's about to be a terrible downpour.
Thank you for taking us to Jerusalem Street for this broadcast.
Hello, Jerusalem. Yeah, listen, it's conjecture. It's based on what we've seen and what we know. But anyone who says, I know exactly what's going to be, take it with a grain of salt. In general, we have had a wonderful 4 years of rebuilding after an Obama administration that really undid a lot of the progress from decades. Working with the State Department now on issues point by point to fix what was broken has been really a pleasure, because you're working with people who are not only open to changing things and to redoing what was done, but people who understand, people who spent a lot of time here. We bring politicians to Israel because we want them to have an experience here without being spoon-fed by that media that Avi was talking about, or by that trip to Israel that's kind of doesn't really get into the nitty-gritty. We want them to see it all, and they go back and they're educated. So we're working with people like Secretary of State Pompeo and people in the White House who will go unnamed and unsung, but they are heroes, who are willing to look at it and say, oh, the State Department puts out a human rights report every year and bashes Israel. Well, let's see what their resources are and who do they quote, and let's change that. So we're hoping that they're leaving a legacy. They'll have 4 more years, hopefully, but they're also leaving a legacy that fixes the things that were really broken. In terms of the Judea and Samaria, Israel in general, Jerusalem being recognized. I mean, you don't have to blame us, the settlers, for being the obstacles to peace. You can look at all the issues surrounding Jerusalem, the Golan Heights. Trump has gotten up as president and fixed those policies as good friends to Israel, and that's in an American interest. So we're glad with the trajectory of the last 4 years, and we're certainly open to working with anyone. The Democratic Party scares me. There were wonderful congressmen who did a lot for the U.S.-Israel relationship, like, the old-timers who were pushed out by those new, very liberal, if you ask them, they'll say it. They don't want their party to be centrist. The Democrats are going way too far to the other side, and that leaves Israel worried, and it should leave a lot of people worried. It should leave a lot of Jewish people worried who are and basically for conservative economics and conservative foreign policy in the Middle East, and that's not the Democratic Party today. So they should be afraid when they're pushing out the people who have led the party till now. They're going to see a change to the left that I think will leave us all really scratching our heads and wondering how we ever thought that would work. And I'm sorry if I have to leave.
No, thank you, Ruthie, and good to have you, David Rubin, also who from not Judea, but from Samaria. We were just speaking to your friends Ruthie and Avi, and Avi was just going to give us the perspective on what the difference would be between a Biden administration and a Trump administration when it comes to the settlements in Judea and Samaria. And then, David, of course, we'd love to hear your perspective on that as well. Go ahead, Avi.
Yeah, well, again, it's very clear. All we have to do is look at what was done by President Trump and his administration versus what was done when Biden was vice president under Obama and the Obama-Biden administration. And I'll give just two very quick examples. Just now, Israel announced the building of 5,000 new homes in Judea and Samaria. And we didn't hear a peep of criticism from the United States administration. Not only that, we didn't hear a peep of criticism from our new Arab Muslim partners in the Middle East, the United Arab Emirates or Bahrain. There was silence, no criticism. Yet under Obama-Biden, I think it was Joe Biden himself, when Israel announced building not in Judea and Samaria, but in Jerusalem, Joe Biden criticized Israel, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stopped the permission for that building in Jerusalem. So again, that's one example of action of what we have under a Trump administration and the changes that have impacted the Middle East, where even the Arab Muslim countries are not criticizing us for building in Judea and Samaria anymore because they don't have the support in Washington, versus what what Biden will bring that he already did under Obama-Biden. And the other thing are the historic wrongs that the Trump administration are changing, that now there is scientific research that America will give Ariel University in the Shomron that David could speak about, correcting a historic wrong that the United States would not give research funds because they viewed an academic institution in Judea and Samaria as not part of Israel, and therefore they wouldn't give funds. That's been corrected. Now, as of last week, any American Jew born in Jerusalem will have his place of birth written as Israel, like everyone else born in Israel or any other country outside of the United States. This administration is correcting historic wrongs that not only did Obama-Biden not correct, but they did their own wrong, very harmful policies to Israel, like supporting by abstaining the harmful United Nations resolution against Israel, the first time ever the United States abstained on a resolution against Israel. So the record is there of how unbelievably good President Trump and his administration has been. We hope and we hope and pray that will continue with his win. And we have to be fearful if Biden ends up winning, which I don't think will happen, if he becomes president, of returning to those policies that are harmful to Israel, therefore harmful to America and the whole freedom-loving world.
Avi Abelow, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to hear positive outcomes today. And thank you again for joining us.
Amen. Thank you, Tuly.